Welcome and happy Monday, halfway through September, joined by some of my favorites here on the Cyber Call. We got a really cool topic we're going to bring you today. It's going to be about, can you believe, Chris, we're going to talk AI?
That's incredible. Took us forever.
It's got to be the first. I mean, we got to be one of the first.
We are. Groundbreaking.
So over the last about a week, I got this article sent to me by Chip Buck over at SAS Alerts, and I'm gonna pop it into chat for everybody. It's and hopefully we'll even get the authors from Anthropic to join us. They have responded to my LinkedIn request. Morning, everybody. Eddie, great to see you. Mike, great to see you. Wonderful to see you all. But we're going to be talking roundabout, some about detail within that report, some a little more about AI-based attack and defense. With that, I wanted to bring on somebody that I think knows just a little bit about incident response and how some of these nation-state threat actors are using it. And as well as we're going to talk about today from this article, AI is giving individuals really this kind of capability. Before we get into it, Clark, isn't that kind of what we're starting to see? That this article highlights that, complete operation, something that we looked at the ecosystem, right, of people that did reconnaissance, people that did lateral movement, people that did ransomware, people that did exfil. It was an entire ecosystem. Now, some of these models are giving full capability. Is that a way to sum it up?
Oh yeah, it's a phenomenal tool. We're seeing, individuals able to operate as the consultant and the operator. They can wear multiple hats and they can do it effectively and efficiently. It's really raised their profile and power.
Yeah, very cool. So let's get into some intros. Let's start off first with our co-hosts. Chris, thanks for filling in. For those that may not know you, a quick intro there. We'll go around.
Yeah, Chris Lair, been around for a while. Incident response and cybersecurity, it's kind of my passion. Came from a company that did both. 7-8 years ago was doing both MSP and cyber and IR work, and then shifted just specifically to IR and security work, and continue to do that in the community. And happy to fill in today as a co-host.
Thanks, man. Bob, good to see you again.
Yeah, good seeing you, Andrew. So my name is Bob Miller. I am the founder of IR Game, which is an automated tabletop incident response system. And I'm also acting as an evangelist for Write a Boom.
That's right. Thanks for bringing that up, Bob. You're doing a great job, by the way. Great interviews with Wes. We'll be talking more about that. Phyllis, we haven't done an intro of you in a while, so why don't we do that, and then we'll go to Clark.
Yeah, sure. Phyllis Lee. I've been at Center for Internet Security, the home of CIS critical security controls and the benchmarks, which are our secure configuration guides. I've been here for about 8 years. Prior to working here, I was at the NSA for about 25 years, and I've been working with MSPs now, 3-4 years at least, and I love it. I love this community. It really is a community. While everyone's competitors, what I think is so interesting is while everyone's all competitors, they're also really trying to help each other out at the same time. And so it really is a community. So I really enjoy working with everyone here.
Well, two things, Phyllis. You've been doing this for 5 years now.
Wow.
Just so I'll date you. And based on your background with the agency and Center for Internet Security, I'm guessing you started with the NSA when you were about 12.
Exactly. Elementary school.
She was the youngest ever employed.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. And Clark, welcome back. Great to see you. A lot of good stuff going on in your world. For those that may not know you,
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the invitation to join everybody here again. Good to see you all. Clark Harshbarger, former FBI special agent working cybersecurity matters, former director of incident response over at CrowdStrike, and now working on an AI venture that we're in stealth mode right now, but looking to bring some excitement to the table. But to echo Phyllis's comments, I think it's wonderful that no matter where we are and competing businesses, we get to make the community better by talking about, security standards and things that can improve everybody's postures.
Yeah. I appreciate your willingness to always help out, Clark. All right. So let me kind of set the stage. As I said, I put an article, if you're coming in just now, and welcome. If you're coming in, if you scroll up, you'll see I put a URL in there, and it's this Anthropic Threat Report. And I want to kind of just read something from it. It says, we've developed sophisticated safety and security measures to prevent misuse of our AI models. So this is the folks at Anthropic talking about Claude. While generally effective, cyber criminals keep finding ways around them. They shared some eye-opening case studies. Threat actors aren't just using AI for advice, they're embedding it in their entire attack lifecycle. We're talking reconnaissance, credential harvesting, extortion, even creating fake identities at scale. So the whole level of AI misuse is really on the rise. A single threat actor really can punch, their weight way above their weight classes, as it were. That's why, I really wanted to get Clark on. I reached out to him and I said, Clark, could we talk about this? Because, as somebody that worked probably some really big cases, this, CrowdStrike isn't working your mom and dad incident response case. You guys are working with major nation state threat actors who are probably leveraging these tools. However, as we said, this article points out now, these tools are giving capabilities to the individual. That said, there are benefits on our side as the defender. So we want to talk about both sides. This isn't going to be all doom and gloom that they're using it. We can use it for good as well. So, Chris, with that, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, sure. So my first question for you, Clark, is help us understand vibe hacking kind of at the 101 level. For example, when an attacker hands an agentic coding tool like Claude a runbook and lets it execute, let's say recon, creds, lateral movement, and then exfil, what new indicators or rhythms show up versus human-only operations?
Yeah, you bet. So first off, if out in the community you haven't been part of vibe coding yet, take advantage of the power of these models like Claude or ChatGPT. And if you remember coding back in the day and you haven't tried out this new tool as for coding, for debugging, for participating in developing platforms and software again, because you got too busy in life, go give it a try. So vibe coding is a super powerful tool, especially for proof of concept, building something quickly, getting access. A new vulnerability is released. I want to validate my systems. I no longer have to figure out on my own how I am going to deploy that in my environment and test that vulnerability. Something like Claude Code and some vibe coding lets you build it with specificity for your environment and infrastructure. And so that's what vibe coding would be like for these threat actors, right? You throw it a runbook, you throw it TTPs, instead of having to work through for months, the old school, and I say old school, a year ago, our biggest concern was something like EDR bypass, and these threat actors might work for months and then try and keep that vulnerability secret so that they can penetrate as many environments as possible, get access to data, and then correlate and figure out their strategy for economizing that. With something like Claude Code, I no longer have to focus on a single vulnerability that's going to give me access. I can throw environments and configurations at Claude Code, and under the auspices of trying to make something positive, as Chris and I were talking, just before this, I can use that to find potential targets of opportunity and avenues of opportunity into that environment. So it changes the game. It's a really powerful tool. It doesn't do the work for you, but when you give it those types of data sets, it's able to enumerate and run through that data much quicker than a single individual or even a team of hackers.
Yeah, when you were mentioning, if you haven't messed around with vibe coding or the AI, I mean, I can't remember a technology that has as much training content and training materials out there for anyone to kind of grab and learn. I mean, literally, you could spend 24 hours a day for a month straight and just, scratch the surface of what's out there. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you haven't delved into this, you need to, right? Regardless if you're a guy or girl get your hands dirty or not. It's something you have to understand and just understand how powerful it is and how it's just there for everybody to consume and train and learn. And on that, let's say AI is now being used to choose targets, maybe tell you the TTPs or even kick off the TTPs. And even the ransom pricing on the fly, what parts of the kill chain become the fastest? And then which ones still can bottleneck the attacker?
Yeah, that's a good question and a little bit of prediction there, right? But ultimately, the things that were bottlenecks for the attackers before become less of a bottleneck, maybe not on an individual basis. For example, attackers are going to work with, initial access and trying to access your VPN. Well, rather than having to work through access brokers exclusively, choose based on what's available, they can pick a target market, enumerate the types of VPNs, and then actually self-select those opportunistic targets instead of just taking what's available from something like an access broker. One of the big bottlenecks once they get in, right? They come in with legit credentials through the VPN. That's hard to detect. They've hit the ground. If they're using living off the land tools, then that becomes a pretty difficult problem for historical EDR to detect. We're talking about some positive things that AI can enhance our current EDR technologies and optimize some of those behavior scanning heuristics also. But ideally, our defensive operators are going to detect those attacks and immediately go on the fight and try and shut down threat actor access, contain these threat actors. Well, with AI embedded as part of that life cycle, without a doubt, they're going to be able to respond to the actions that our defenders are taking so much quicker, right? We had a few threat actor groups like Scattered Spider that had very good playbooks and could respond to our defensive consultants and defensive teams pretty quickly. You add a tool like this into that life cycle, it's almost unstoppable if they're already within your network. So we've got some work to do on our side to optimize detection and containment to prevent them from running rampant within those environments.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, it is, we've been preaching a lot of this stuff that we've needed to better understand the users, what they're doing, the types of activity. And if you haven't already started down that path with your clients, you're behind the 8-ball because it's going to be used against you. And it is, people say, well, it's tougher now. People are working remote or whatever. No, people still have patterns and habits, and those things can be picked up. And it's just how quickly can you respond and the steps you take. And also the rules change, right? I mean, I know I talked to a lot of MSPs over the last couple of months, and I've been harping on them to have those conversations and say, hey, there are things that are going to have to stop in the middle of the day to stop an attack. We can't wait till the weekend or to that change window or whatever. And I know, Clark, you've had to deal with that at a larger scale with some of your clients in the past. And so I always envision the movie War Games. And when all those two guys they're battling, the machines are just battling back and forth. That's kind of how I see kind of the AI bad guys versus the AI good guys happen in the near future.
Go ahead, Andrew, and then I've got an alibi to add on to that too.
Oh, go ahead, Clark. Go ahead. I can come in after.
So one of the other bottlenecks is ultimately, we know threat actors' goals, right? It's not just to shut down your networks. It's not to extract data from the systems. It's to make money, right? Period. So we know their goals. They are accessing your environment for that purpose. And there's a few things that give them access to the economization of that, right? It's holding your network hostage or holding your data hostage. It can be encryption. It can just be extortion. But in the past, as we're doing forensics and the incident response, we're looking for what data was accessed. For example, we can actually see threat actors conducting text-based searches to identify what looks to them to be your most valuable data. If I throw an enumerated file system into Claude in less than a second, it'll tell me the most value. It's going through file names. It can do metadata and insanely good at identifying what data is going to be worth the most. So even if it changed nothing else of the entire life cycle, the ability to identify what data is your largest pain point, I think is huge. And that alone would rewrite the landscape for these threat actors because they get access to your crown jewels instantly.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say, Clark, just talk about that then. Do we need to think differently about, our file structures, how we, where we put our data, how we do, because I mean, I see Bob shaking his head. I mean, it's hard, just going back, doing data inventory, come on, for most SMBs, that's a challenge, let alone data tagging, data identification, data tagging, et cetera. So what are your thoughts on that, Clark?
I'll make one comment, and then I bet Bob and Chris will want to chime in too. We've needed to do that for a long time.
Yeah.
There it is, right there.
Takes so significantly, though. Yeah. If you don't do it, it's done, right? We would say it's not when, it's not if, but when you're going to have a data breach. Now it's not if, but when the data that is your most priceless possession, intellectual property, customer data, sensitive data, protected data, it is at risk of exposure at the forefront of the battle right now.
Yeah. Bob, maybe as you comment, Clark, will that change maybe who threat actors focus on? For example, IP attorneys or, attorneys that handle IP for large scale corporations. Do you see that? And sorry, Bob, do you think that'll change who they go after?
I do, and that's a prediction, and I'd be willing to stick my neck out for that. It's been targets of opportunity, and we've seen threat actor groups focus on healthcare or law firms, but it's been more haphazard based on what credentials they could get with access brokers. If the data is worth the price, right? If the juice is worth the squeeze, then absolutely they're going to put additional pressures where it makes the most sense to extort the most money. So I would definitely take that as a prediction in the coming year.
It sounds like an IR game in the making, Bob.
Yeah, well, and because I can hear Phyllis in my head. That's the only reason I'm shaking my head, because I can hear Phyllis in my head saying, hey, why aren't we doing what we're supposed to do since we've been doing this, like segmenting your network and making sure your data stores are not all on one segment and all the basic things that we should be doing. But the one observation I'd make about the fact that these I'm going to call it a process, right? So these people are getting basically a conveyor belt put together is for a process that's automated front to back. What that's going to do is spread out the target base, because if you don't have to spend as much time per target running these things, that they're not only going to stick with the high value, high margin targets like lawyers and healthcare, they're going to stop, drop, and roll in all the little small ones too, because all they really have to do is fire off their scripting. And if it makes it through the script, then great. If it doesn't, they move on to the next target, right? So my observation is going to be they can continue to pressure those. They're already there, so they're going to continue to pressure those. But this is going to move down. This is going to move down organization scales now, because this is making it much easier and faster, which means everybody's going to be more of a target than just the specialized guys. That's
yeah. And remember that, I mean, just in Clark, he probably has several examples too, where you go into a smaller organization and they have the intellectual property of a client or somebody else that's supposed to be, but they're the ones that do the bad job of protecting it. So the bad guys, you might be looking at the big target, but you go attack somebody in their ecosystem and you have an easier way to get just as much of the crown jewels from somebody else than from that. And people just put this stuff on the back burner. I mean, still to this day, especially when I've been running tabletops, I mean, a lot of people have move critical stuff into the cloud, into SaaS, but you're like, well, where's your unstructured data, or at least your historical stuff? Oh, yeah, that's still sitting on file servers. We haven't got around to that yet.
Yep.
Interesting.
100%.
Yeah. So, hey, Clark, on that, what do you, I know there's a little more prediction though, but what do you have to pick up on from a telemetry perspective to try to pick up on these, if they're using these kind of newer techniques for exfil?
Yeah, boy, that's for our data science scientists to analyze and incorporate, right? That's the optimization on the front end side, but the number of requests that can be made, right? Optimizing instead of these human-based attacks running scripts exclusively, but not just running one script or iterating through a set of scripts, but choosing the appropriate attack path for the technologies that are deployed. So recognizing that AI can pivot instead of having to, be a deterministic set of scripts that makes decisions based exclusively on the tech stack. I think being able to pivot and have some what looks like innovation from an AI attack path, I think that those are going to be some behaviors that have to be detected. Like I talked about earlier, watching for those file enumeration methods. I mean, we're going to have some additional tech built in to really be watching for that file enumeration. And yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one to solve right now, I think.
Yeah, there you go. So, hey, somebody figures that out, you can make some money. All right, let's jump to ransom notes. Yeah. So, ransom notes, historically have been somewhat templatized. You could tell the exact ransom note, the group associated with the ransom note. And a lot of times it doesn't tell you a lot, but it seems like now they're maybe using AI to kind of tailor those ransom notes. What are, can you give us some pointers on maybe how you can detect whether or not a note is AI generated versus not so?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good question. That's one of the things that I love about the cybersecurity community also is there is a niche for so many different professions within cybersecurity. The fact that we have negotiators that can come from law enforcement or the civilian perspective, and they're negotiating with these ransomware and extortion operators is pretty phenomenal. That still falls within cybersecurity. Not ideal that we have to deal with that, but so that's a question really, I would say, for those operators, but that becomes a difficult problem because working hand in hand with somebody who does extortion negotiations for an incident response team is critical often to provide insight and intelligence into the attack path, especially when they come in with legitimate credentials and it was detected late, right? So identifying initial access often comes because of those negotiations. And if we can't attribute the notes to a particular threat actor group because they come in such a wide variety, that lowers the fidelity of answers that we're already, on. Sometimes it's difficult. In fact, many times it's difficult to give initial access because they come to the door with the keys, and that lowers that bar even more, or raises the bar even more, which means the questions you want as the security leader on your team: how did they get in? And you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to an IR team that says, well, here's what they did when they were in there, and we just can't tell you how they made initial access. That's a hard answer. So detecting that is going to be, data science, but I think it's going to be, that's another critical key area for us to immediately address is we've got to find a way to correlate those, even with the diversity of notes that are coming out.
Yeah, and my last part before I hand it off to Phyllis is, we've seen where these threat actors have used knowledge of regulations and laws and such to their advantage to apply more pressure and as leverage to their victims. How do you see like AI playing a part? And have you seen any attorneys, breach attorneys out there have to respond differently in light of these kind of new AI methods?
Yeah, so that's something that I've talked with my counterparts in the law firms side. I don't think that we've seen a lot of the need to pivot just yet, right? Every day is different for them. And they wear they shoulder a pretty heavy load as far as incident response goes. We play a little narrower band with the incident response when they're a breach coach and dealing with all sides of the customer relations and PR and negotiations and all that goes into it. So I would say that their landscape is continuously changing. I don't know that that's hit really hard yet, at least in my experience of talking with them.
Yeah. All right, Phyllis. Oh, I think Andrew wants to say something real quick.
Yeah, well, Phyllis, as it goes to you, I know the controls are under review for version 9. And can you give us any insights on what you guys are thinking about AI and how it plays into, from a defender's perspective? Is there chatter, hey, the community wants to know what to do?
Yeah, I mean, we revisit it often. And I think I've said before on the call is while attackers are using AI to their advantage, it's getting faster, easier for them. You can hear all the things Clark's saying, and others on the show. What we don't see right now are new kinds of attacks where we would have to put in new controls, right? And so they're getting better, they're getting faster, they're getting more efficient, but we still need to have good cyber hygiene, really. I mean, you know what I mean? So far, we don't see any kind of new defender techniques. Now, 6 months from now, if there is new tech that's out there, like Clark says, maybe Clark's company goes out of stealth mode. We'll see, but right now we don't see a big delta. The biggest thing, quite honestly, that people are struggling with is really governance. And, I think that could be a special side paper, not necessarily a special different guidance, not necessarily embedded in the controls, which is more kind of like a little more tactical than that kind of thing. But that's what I see when I see the questions coming in to the different communities. It's really more geared towards governance.
Two things I could just point out, Phyllis. There was a great article by MIT on AI, and it was their report for the 2025 report. Interestingly, even in organizations with governance, it on the margin, it really wasn't doing much. That's the
Right.
net of it. People are like, I think it was 95% of people were still doing their jobs with their personal accounts, right? I think that's the figures, right,
Yes.
Clark? You're shaking your head.
Yes.
So
very,
that's
very low adoption rates.
yeah,
right?
very low adoption of it's not that people don't want to do it. The other thing, though, Phyllis, you made a comment that there's not really new controls, possibly reordering of importance. So, for example, if you're an MSP, I would argue that we did M365 Mavens on Friday, right? Identity, and is really could that be more important than Control One, right? I'm not saying you're reordering it that way, but just for conversation's sake.
Yeah, definitely. I think reordering is on the table. I will also have to say, I am going to host like an asset management kind of workshop to say, do we need to change, for example, what you would collect in asset management, right? And maybe with data inventory, we would give out a little bit of different guidance, and maybe also, I think I said this on another call with SaaS apps. What do you really need to collect for software asset inventory? And like you said, with account management, how is it that you say, okay, kind of like with these SaaS apps, like don't use your personal account to do work stuff, which everyone is doing to get around policies because everyone's scared of AI, but it doesn't matter.
or just like, I'll give you a last thing, I promise, Phyllis, and we'll get back to Clark, but like, do we incorporate things like the recent token protection from Microsoft for OAuth-based attacks, like as a part of a specific piece, because so many people are relying on M365 and the proliferation of OAuth, token hijacking. Maybe we get that specific because of the adoption of that. I don't know.
That's a good question. We definitely try to stay technology agnostic. So, I mean, that's something definitely to be looked into, though.
Yeah. You almost have to wonder. Like, I know, being tech agnostic is critical, but when you know the adoption of an M365 is it's almost like your OS, right? Per se these days.
Right. I mean, I guess the question is, what will we do with the I mean, there is an M365 benchmark, so maybe there's something in there as well.
Yeah. All right. Over to you and Clark.
Yeah. So I just pushed mute by accident. So, as we know, North Korea is very well known for, saying that they're actually, in the U.S. or whatever, and posing as like a U.S. worker. So these so-called no-code developers use AI to pass interviews and ship code. And I've actually personally talked with a big financial institution where this was a problem across that institution. And someone I know was trying to get rid of someone, and HR was like, just collect as much data as you can, because you couldn't be 100% sure. And so there are laws around just like randomly firing people. But anyway, it's rampant. So in some instances in these big organizations, for sure. So how should MSPs be vetting contractors and offshore staff when AI can be used so well, to fool all these employers, and even like I said, a big financial institution?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Phyllis. This tracks with a group that CrowdStrike calls Famous Kalima, and there are other names for that group and other groups, but primarily North Korean operators that are collecting salaries, and our MSPs are just as exposed as our big financial institutions, as you mentioned. I've seen these operators will go in, ones and twos to these smaller organizations, and up to 20 and 25 at some of these larger organizations. And detecting them is difficult, as you just highlighted. So especially as individuals at the MSP level, the best we can do are going to be the standards that we would hold any developer to, but it's going to require technical depth on your team to ask more follow-up questions about previous work and the work they're doing now, because AI can answer those questions, right? They can leverage an AI tool or just prompt and get those answers. Live coding assessments, their claimed background verification of that. I know that sometimes in the hiring process, we don't go through our due diligence and identify that and validate that they went to the institutions and that they have knowledge of what took place at those institutions. So those are two things you could do during and post or pre-interview. And then, but technical knowledge on our side to be able to ask very detailed questions about previous work, and does it align with what they've got on their resume, what they're saying in real time. And then obviously video call dependency, but with the ability of some of these models now to enhance and replace video, that's a difficult one. And I think that's only going to get worse, obviously.
Yeah, thanks. So, we just talked about, initial access, lateral movement, and these are all, MITRE attack tactics. And so threat actors are integrating, AI to span all these MITRE attack tactics. So what do you believe is the single defensive control that organizations can implement to help defend against lateral movement?
Yeah, so I think this is similar. What you just pointed out, that the controls aren't necessarily different. Our single best control right now, and most important, I would say, is identity-based controls. I would add in behavioral heuristics with AI-specific detection. A lot of tools are adding that kind of fidelity into their tool. I think that some enhanced identity protection, maybe, pardon me, real-time credential analysis, because with AI, you can pivot credentials quickly. And so detecting that would be important. And then to Bob's earlier point, I think cross-domain visibility, right? Segregating networks, but then having that cross-domain visibility so that you can identify those attacks that are taking place on multiple footprints.
This is a little off script, but I know you're quick on your feet. Typically, I'm curious what you're seeing or what you used to see. Typically, and maybe this is for the whole group, what you would see is like the networking folks are looking at their dashboard. The sysadmins are looking at their dashboard, and so like you can't necessarily see that correlation. And then maybe you've got some cyber folks doing something different. Do you see that kind of merging, or is it like, oh, we need, AI to help us to correlate all that data, even in our own internal networks, because everything really typically is siloed off. So like, if I see lateral movement happening, maybe that's like the networking folks who have access to that data versus, the sysadmins or whatever.
So that's a great question. It goes to the positives, some of the positives that Andrew, you wanted to talk through too. So one of the advantages for threat actors for vibe coding is they get to see all parts of the attack path, right? They have the whole life cycle at their disposal, where you just pointed out our defenders have particular pockets. And I think one of the challenges we have is lots of our tech is adding AI detection, right? Optimization into those processes, but it hasn't fixed the problem you just identified, which is our networking folks are looking at the networking dashboard. It's correlating all of that data. And there are products and processes that are trying to aggregate that kind of data, right? Take a SIEM and be able to detect across your environment and correlate EDR with logs and configs from your other products. I don't think that there's I don't think we have a good handle on that as a community. And that is somewhere where we have to focus, is getting our teams to correlate that data together. So I don't think we're doing it yet. There's definitely some tech and some startups that are targeting that area. I think we need to do better. I see Chris nodding.
Yeah, I agree. I think the MSP community as a whole doesn't really have an understanding of what data that their customers possess that could lend a lot of help to this problem, right? And there's a lot of logging and stuff that just doesn't get captured, or just the wrong logging captured. Like you said, Phyllis, there's just a lot of stuff that's just network only, right, and not security only. Or somebody sees, well, that's just application stuff. No one cares about that. Well, now we do care about that stuff. So yeah, and you see some startups and stuff trying to figure that stuff out. But the key here is we're going to have to, as the community, is going to have to figure it out fast as well.
Yeah.
That kind of a little bit leads into agentic AI. So attackers are using it, should defenders as well. And so Clark, for you, how are you approaching this? And is it, are your efforts focused initially on M365?
Yeah, it makes you feel a little guilty tearing down on Microsoft. They obviously we all love and use Microsoft in so many ways.
That's why you have to tear them down, because they're ubiquitous. So right, so just like Andrew said, M365, everyone's using it.
So the common phrase we say just in our little security groups, the call is coming from within the house, right? The security teams of Microsoft, I think, do a good job enhancing and helping their customers, but also they're the root of the problem. And so especially the M365 environment, agentic AI, if you haven't had an opportunity to play and leverage some of those tools, what an opportunity to train your associates and your consultants and have them leverage a tool that can almost replace that level and let them perform at a higher level. So if you're not using agentic AI or some tool that has that capability, it gives you the ability to take a set of steps that need to be secured, configurations from CIS, right, or controls from CIS, and make sure that they are implemented across the board. I think it's a real opportunity to do something methodically and consistently, and you can run those checks and validate on an iterative basis, daily, hourly, by the minute, and make sure that your configurations and controls aren't being changed. So there's a lot of opportunity for agentic AI. I think it's a powerful tool, and I think everybody should be using it.
That's awesome. Okay, so just put you on the spot a little bit. So give us 3 AI hunts or, queries or features that you would run daily to detect automated recon at scale, credential harvesting attempts, and data staging or exfil.
Okay. All right. So the first one
is automated recon at scale. Like, what should people be looking for?
Yeah. So I don't know that this is different from the past years, but systematic API calls and organized scanning is obviously loud and clear that you're being targeted. And that's been that way for many years, decades, even at this point. But the alert threshold, because AI can do that and make multiple calls across your environment because it can detect what APIs are exposed. I think that the alert threshold for those systematic API calls gives you an opportunity to detect that you're being bombarded right from an AI tool. That would be one way.
Clark, question on that, and maybe to Chris too. We saw such a proliferation of VPN attacks. It's called out in so many threat reports. Would you see those types of things? Is that an example of one that you could possibly detect as being used in that manner?
For VPN access, I think my perspective is that VPN access, the brute forces against VPN access aren't the concern, or they haven't been a concern for my customers in the past. It's primarily that initial access where they come to the door with valid credentials already. Brute force occasionally gets through, but most VPN technologies have, they can detect that and shut it down as long as it's configured appropriately. But your thoughts, Chris and Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, that the challenge is they already have those creds and they're in. The things that we've seen where we've gone in situations and we've kind of shut all that stuff down, and then a month later, the company decides to turn all that stuff back up. They're like, I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? So, I mean, it's you see somebody logging in at 3:00 in the morning that doesn't log in at 3:00 in the morning. You're like, come on now. I mean, or you've seen somebody that like, hey, I thought that person was sick. Why are they working all night long? Well, they really are sick. It's not them working all night long. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And the MSPs struggle with this VPN thing because, some of them have thousands of employees of clients that have VPN access. And, but it is one that you have to focus on, but it just isn't in the same kind of thing of what we're talking about here.
Chris, can I just double click? You've said, I think it was on the Corey Clark cyber call, that you and Corey have worked with customers who are knowingly under attack, who are like, yeah, we know, but we got to keep working. Like, what have you dealt with that too, Clark? I see you shaking, nodding your head.
That's a tough problem for MSPs and small business because everybody, downtime affects enterprises down to small business, but it feels like it impacts small business disproportionately so. And I think that MSPs feel that pressure that they have to be up and running. Even since leaving CrowdStrike, the call I get most routinely from my law firm partners is about a business that's had exposure, decided not to go the route of full incident response. What do they need to do to make sure that the threat's contained? That's an open-ended question and can't be answered without digging deep into what's going on. And oftentimes MSPs have had that pressure to solve, keep the uptime going. And at that point, sometimes an incident response can find those answers, and sometimes the data just doesn't exist any longer.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I mean, I heard of one where the MSP was convinced that they had contained it for the client, and then within less than 24 hours, their client was completely encrypted.
Well, Chris, what risk there though, Chris, for legally? Like this is maybe the lesson from the takeaway for MSPs.
That's a good question,
right? For that pressure. Hey, we know we're under attack. Just keep us up and running. The MSP complies. Then really bad stuff happens. What can go down though? If Spencer's on the other side, meaning you have the attorney now for the for the customer who's now look at the MSP saying you should have known better. And
yeah, that's a tough one, right? There's two sides of it. Number one is the client could even get in more trouble if they get sued because now they knew something and they it could easily be portrayed as they ignored it or whatever the case may be. So whoever's litigating against them, you just made their job a heck of a lot easier because you could say, hey, look, a lot of times you could argue, well, you did everything you could and the threat actor still got in. But if you have decided upon an attack to continue to do business and not take the necessary steps, that's not going to look good at all. And any attorney's going to have a tough time defending you that. On the MSP side, that's where you have to be incredibly careful. And you have to document everything. And sometimes you may just even have to almost say no and almost have them paint you into a corner. So, yeah, it's a difficult situation. I've seen people, this is where maybe TILs could come in and talk to it from a contractual perspective on how you can kind of cover your butt ahead of time with that. But a lot of MSPs get in these situations for the first time and they don't have that MSA in place that helps them on that side of things. And they're going to catch blame one way or another.
Chris, just real quick though, could the insurance company deny a claim if they're knowingly continuing to operate and letting things continue and get larger and larger and larger?
Yes. So, not speaking for everyone, but there are ways that the carrier, depending on, their policy and what's going on, can have certain stipulations that say, hey, you either need to take these steps or whatever the case may be. And then they can say, hey, your coverage is at risk if you decide not to do these things that the IR firms told you to do and all those types of things. So yeah, those conversations can happen and they can get kind of ugly.
It can be on both sides of the equation, by the way. It can be the insurance for the MSP as well as the insurance for the client, because if your insurance cover for your MSP finds out you're not holding them to the line, like you said, either in an MSA or when these occur, you can always get them this way. What we did, we made them sign a waiver and says, okay, so what you're asking us to do is this, and this is what we're recommending you do. But if you're going to go this route, then that's fine. Just return this letter signed off on, and we'll be good to go. And what I can tell you, 8 out of 10 times, they decide to let us shut it down. As soon as they have to put their name on something and take responsibility for it, then all of a sudden they get religion and we can actually get to work. So you just need to be willing to do that.
Yeah, Bob, that's the answer. And Chris, and it's not an uncommon story. I wouldn't say it happens every day, but I have story after story, Chris, that's the way it goes down. The MSP knows it needs to be contained. They've been told by the client that, client's taking liability, but to Bob's point, there's no winners if you get to that point. So the only way to deal with it is transfer that risk to the customer, let them make the business decision, but take that risk off your shoulders. That has to be done. If you don't have the MSAs in place right now, I would amend them immediately, because that's, even though you're not the incident response firm, you're the MSP, you're being looked to for some of those security questions, and you have to be able to answer and say, yes, we can provide the service, or no, we can't and we don't, and we transfer that back to you, and have that solution in place, because you're going to face that.
I mean, just like if your office is flooding and the plumber comes in and says, I need to cut the water off. You're like, nope, we still need water. We got to work. It's the same thing.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Over to you, Bob.
All right.
I only did one of those.
Credential harvesting and data staging exfil. Sorry.
So not that different from what's the attack path is the same attack path that threat actors have been using. So you're still looking for credential harvesting. I'm looking for automated Active Directory enumeration and systematic password attempts, but I'm looking for the number of domain controllers that are queried there. That is going to raise, and it's not critical that I detect whether it's AI or human operated, but it will be obvious that you're being attacked and they're leveraging a tool. I don't think it changes what you detect or your response to that, but you're looking for multiple domains. Same thing as we were talking about for recon is systematic changes to the environment, systematic Kerberos attacks, credential reuse patterns. And then for data staging, this goes to what we were talking about. The identification of high value data is something that is probably the most prolific and prevalent thing that these actors are going to leverage AI for immediately. It's low hanging fruit. So for a regular automated hunt, I'd be looking for organized file movement, the way that they stage that data, right? Their organized file movement, systematic data categorization, and then file renames in those data staging locations. So if you have a lot of file access within your environment, then that's going to be harder to detect, obviously. But looking for large data sets, hundreds of gigabytes, and file reuse and rename patterns, I would say. Again, not critical that you identify it as AI. We should be doing this anyway, because then you can call out and detect threat actor activity within your environment for the same reason. But it's more critical because that's something that is going to be used and is being used right now.
Awesome. We should be using AI to enumerate our own files and look for our own critical data. Really?
So that's a great question. I wanted to ask you, Phyllis, is with the CIS controls, what do you see the biggest opportunity to use AI as a tool for our own organizations?
I mean, I think it's the categorization of data, and that's what I'm taking away from this conversation, because we are looking to provide better guidance on those first three controls. And data inventory is clearly so difficult for everybody. And, we often are like, oh, go look here for this guidance and that guidance. But then, we go there and it's like 500 pages on, how to categorize your data and all that kind of stuff. So I literally wrote myself a note about that.
Yeah, what an opportunity for your file servers to learn agentic AI.
Yeah.
Grab an MFT and rip through your data and do some data What an opportunity for a project, for even a small MSP, to learn the tool, figure out how to apply it. And then if there's tech to do it, then great. If not, then build it yourself and vibe code.
Clark has given you more revenue generating ideas in today's episode than ever.
All right, over to you, Bob.
All right. So speaking of that, or along those same lines, so I was wondering, Clark, when these attacks start happening, you wind up getting thousands and even tens of thousands of alerts, right? I mean, these things are going to start pouring in because of the velocity that an AI attack can actually have. And, instead of taking minutes between commands, you'll see things like seconds, right? Consistently every few seconds, things going on. So, I mean, do you guys have a basic playbook or a recipe about how to reduce that noise down to something that can fit inside a bucket and say, okay, well, this is an attack because these 4,000 alerts are running this particular vector attack. So that belongs in this attack story, whereas these belong in this other one, like if they're going after file service or ransomware or whatever they're up to. Do you guys have, do you have any experience with building that recipe for how to go about doing that? And that takes into account not missing some of the dirty tricks they can do, like low and slow, right? Because they could be playing the low and slow game and they could be using these other alerts as distractions. So do you have any idea about how to work both sides of the fence?
Yeah, if I had to label within the cybersecurity space, right, there's so many hot areas for AI, but SOC alert fatigue, I think, there's a lot of startups, there's a lot of incumbents that are adding AI tooling on to reduce the number of false positives. And that's a huge opportunity and something that an AI tool set is very good at. So the things that technology is doing is going to be correlation by, timing patterns, automatic attack chain reconstruction, really looking for behavioral clustering where you're looking at attack types based on methodology instead of just IOCs the way we've done it in the past. And I think that's a power that an AI optimization in a SOC brings, especially, is grouping by methodology instead of IOCs. And then it's good, but it's not so good that it replaces all humans. You still need human in the loop. Low and slow, like you said, context specific threats still require a human. I like to say, in my experience with what I'm seeing here, is we can replace up to about our second tier with with an agentic AI to do a lot of that, what we were just talking about there. It doesn't replace all humans. It just gives us the ability to move them up the chain a little bit. So I guess that would be my recipe. I don't have, something for you to go deploy. There are everybody I would say in the SOC space is working to solve that problem. I don't have good insight to say which one is doing it best right now, but it'll change tomorrow anyway. So if you're not using agentic AI in the SOC, you should be, because that'll reduce your 100%. False positives, and you need it to correlate the number of alerts that you're seeing there.
Yeah, well, you and Phyllis were talking about doing data classification by using, AI. The thing that presumes, though, is that you're willing to let that 800-pound gorilla loose on your network before you know what you need to be protecting, right? That's always going to kind of be the deal that you got to consider as a part of the plan. Now, I think it's absolutely going to be the only way to do it, but you need to be planning for it ahead of time. So along those lines, how do you configure these artificial intelligence tools so they got a little bit of a guardrail around them, so they don't do things like generate exploit code or dump into each of your tenants and grab as much as they can, and take any kind of destructive action whatsoever, but still be useful, right? Because you want to be able to use that tool when you're trying to do defense. So what kind of guardrails do you need to be considering putting up as a part of the process?
That is a great point to highlight. Is cybersecurity within AI is a new field also, right? It doesn't have ethics. It does have some ethics and some guardrails depending on what model you're using. But it doesn't solve those problems. And if a threat actor gets control of your tool, is going to leverage it the same way you're using it. So if I'm sitting in an MSP and I want to try data classification, for example, to the project we were just talking about, I wouldn't give access directly to my file servers to agentic AI, which you could vibe code, and Claude will help you provision an account and give you direct access to that data. If you do that without deterministic boundaries around that agentic AI, it can have the capability to run rampant, as you said. So number one, if I'm building the project, I want to give it deterministic inputs, and those deterministic inputs would come from external to your environment. It would be provided to the agentic AI versus letting the agentic AI run loose within your network with its own account.
Yeah, I would say start by locking everything down, and then back off what you need to get the job done in the interim, right? And then kind of work backwards on that. That would be my suggestion for folks. So I'll do my last question here, because this is near and dear to my heart. So let's do a little tabletop of the future, right? So you're handed a case, and the thing that is that an AI agent was used to run the op end to end. You knew that was what was happening. That was what you were dealing with. So what's your first hour look like? What's your first day look like? And your first week response plan?
Ooh, yeah. So this is a good one. This is where we put our money where our mouths are, right? So same response, I think, that we have with a human-based attack, other than AI can adapt faster than a human-based attack. So isolate your affected systems immediately. You have to identify those. So identify and contain. Containment's number one. Contain the threat. You can't eradicate the threat until you have established containment. Containment depends on identifying those systems, capturing all of the available logs before data rolls over, before AI modifies its approach and is leveraging other tool systems, making sure you know not only what data is in your environment, but what log sources you have within your environment. And this, I bet Chris could preach this. This is just IR 101. It's more critical because of the speed and efficacy that AI tooling has. So assemble your incident response team beforehand, and knowing that you're going to be targeted with AI tooling, make sure that they're read into that, right? If you don't have an IR team that is AI friendly or is willing to leverage some form of AI as part of their response plan, I think you're at a losing position already. And then same as any incident response, making sure that you have out-of-band communication channels established. So ironically, I don't think that initial first hour is that different from any other incident response playbook that you would have. but it's more critical to do it faster. First day, network forensics on the systems that you've identified. Let's see. I don't think there's much different than a standard incident response, right? I want to be looking for, I want to make sure that I've turned up logging. So if I have logging that's rolling over, I want to make sure that those log sources that if I can enable longer log retention, that I do so immediately.
I think you're right about that. I think it's the standard process, right?
Yeah, I turn up my EDR so that I'm, if I'm paying for the basics, I want to turn up detection capabilities, response capabilities, all that I can. So to me, that's the same as any incident response.
All right, back over to you.
First hour, first day.
Yeah. I think that's all we're going to have time for, right, Andrew?
we brought it right to the top of the hour. So
there we are.
Yeah, it was great, Clark. Thank you so much for coming on. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I think a lot of value to everybody out there. Chris, Bob, appreciate you filling in. And as always, Phyllis, thanks for joining us each and every week. We'll see you guys next Monday. Make it a good one all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.